2,059 is the total number of cards printed in 2024, with 1,937 of them being spells. With that many cards, you would be forgiven if you didn't know every last one that you should be putting in your commander decks. In this video, I'm going to go over 15 hidden gems that I think are underplayed and underloved. Let's monkey around. The first hidden gem is What Must Be Done. This is a 3 and 2 white sorcery that's in about 11,000 decks. There are 2 modes on this spell and you can choose one of them. The first is Let the World Burn, destroying all artifacts and creatures. The second is Release Juno. This lets you return a target historic permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it, if it's a creature. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are your historic permanents. Both sides of this spell are fairly costed, and having them both on one card gives you a lot of flexibility in what you can do with it when it's in your hand. I like this especially if you have a commander with a mana value of 4 or more, so you can let it go to the graveyard and then get it back onto the battlefield for a discount, instead of paying that commander tax. It's also really great if your deck has an enchantment theme, or even just a sub-theme, because this targets creatures and artifacts on that wrath. Tom Bombadil and Narcy are a couple of ones that come straight to mind, where they're doing the saga thing, letting you get back your commander, or any of those high-impact sagas that have gone to the graveyard. If you're doing Legend Matters things with Gandalf the White, this is another powerful spell that you can use to get him back onto the battlefield, or any other legendary permanent you want from your graveyard. And like I said before, it's best in a commander with a mana value 4 or more for that discount. So something like an Ao the Dawn Sky, where dying is a part of the plan, it could fit in really nicely. Quick break, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel. I can't promise anything, but if you do subscribe, we might cure cancer. The second hidden gem is Shard Mage's Rescue. This is in roughly 14,000 decks, and it's a single white enchantment aura with flash. You enchant a creature you control, and as long as Shard Mage's Rescue entered this turn, the enchanted creature has hexproof. It also grants the enchanted creature +1/+1. This is a solid one-time protection spell to protect your commander or another priority creature from a Swords to Plowshare or other targeted removal. What elevates it for me is that it's a permanent that sticks around. I have it in my Alela Artful Provocateur deck because that commander gets targeted all the time, and this is a good way to shut that down while getting a fairy on the cast. Daxos Blessed by the Sun, a white devotion commander, loves this because it also has no protection for itself, and this enchantment sticks around to elevate that devotion by 1 white pip. And finally, Gen Arcanum Weaver can be protected when the enchantment comes down, but then it serves as awesome fodder to bring something really juicy out of your graveyard back onto the battlefield. Because there's no sorcery speed restriction on Gen's ability, you could sacrifice a different enchantment to re-bring this onto the battlefield and protect your commander again from another piece of targeted removal. The third hidden gem is Immortal Obligation. That's roughly in 12.5 thousand decks. It's a 1 and a white instant that lets you return a target creature card from an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control with a duty counter on it. For as long as that creature has a duty counter on it, it is goated, can't attack you or a permanent you control, and can't block creatures you control. This is one of my favorite fun spells from 2024, really shaking up the game for a very limited cost, letting one of your opponents get their best creature back on the battlefield with little to no harm to you. You can spring a surprise blocker onto the battlefield to destroy an opponent's commander. And really, it's a great political tool to give somebody something they want for something in return. You have to be a little bit careful with this one though. You shouldn't be reanimating your opponent's Atali, for instance. In decks where you want your opponents attacking each other, like in Brina the Demagogue, I love this card. A commander like Hope S-Theme has a plan of milling your opponents out, making sure there's a lot of targets in the graveyard for you to reanimate. And finally, in Drana and Linvala, you can bring back a creature with an activated ability that Strana and Levana can use instead of your opponent. The fourth hidden gem is Assassin's Gauntlet, roughly in 19,000 decks. This is a 2 and a blue artifact equipment from the Assassin's Creed set. When Assassin Gauntlet enters the battlefield, attach it up to one target creature you control, and then tap all creatures a target opponent controls. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card and then discard a card, with an equip cost of 2. This can be a straight up lethal piece of equipment against a single opponent of yours in your commander games. They could have 99 creatures for all you care, but you put those shields right down, tapping all those creatures, and can swing in for the W. The stat boost is pretty mid, but the card selection with that draw and discard is quite welcome. I love seeing more cards. This obviously works best if your plan is to win through combat damage. So if you're going wide with something like Alondra Sky Dreamer, this can knock down all of those flying blockers to take them out for good. Or if you're going tall in a Voltron kind of deck, like Elsha Threefold Master, strap this on her, take the defenses out from somebody, swing in for lethal potentially, or just get a whole bunch of monk tokens. And finally, you can do some cheeky copying things, like with Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance, where this can come down, you can swing in for some amount of damage, and then Saheeli can keep copying that equipment to keep on tapping down your opponent's creatures. Hidden gem number 5 is Reenact the Crime. That's in roughly 11,000 decks. This is a 1 and triple blue instant that exiles a target non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. You can copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. The very important thing, and something I overlooked, is that it says a target non-land card. If your opponent put a sorcery or instant on the stack and it goes to the graveyard afterwards, like it does, this can target that instant or sorcery from their graveyard. The same goes for creatures or spells if they are milled from your opponent's graveyard, or of course if they are destroyed. It's probably best in a mono or 2-color deck because of that pip requirement, so keep that in mind. My favorite spot for this card is in commanders that are actively discarding cards from your hand, like Captain Howler Sea Scourge. You're setting yourself up with those bonus stats, and if you discard something like an Omniscience, you can bring it back to the battlefield for a discount. In a similar vein, I like this in your looting decks, like in Rona Herald of Invasion. You're actively discarding those cards, probably in some sort of reanimation theme, where this can get all of those creatures right back onto the battlefield. And finally, I'm considering this for my Kami of the Crescent Moon deck, which is a mill deck. I could leave that 4 mana up because it's pretty reactive as a deck, and as I'm milling out the table, I can bring back my favorite of all the goodies they put in their bin. Hidden gem number 6 is Delightful Discovery. This is only in about 2,100 decks, and is hopefully your Delightful Discovery today. It's a 4 and a blue instant that costs 1 less to cast for each spell your opponents have cast this turn. You scry 2 and then draw 2 cards. The upside of this card is a single blue for that scry 2 draw 2, which is awesome. But even its downside is limited, because your opponents are going to be casting spells, and if they cast 2 spells, this becomes basically a better quick study, which is found in 50,000 decks right now. Probably the best place for this is in those decks that have the draw to reward, something like a Min, Wily Illusionist. But also if you're in the scry space, which is a kind of weird space, but props to you if you're playing it, like in Galadriel of Lothlorien, this is just a great card for that deck. And if you're in the group hug space, where you're giving your opponents more cards, like in the Second Doctor, the natural consequence of that is them casting more spells, cheapening the cost of Delightful Discovery. Hidden gem number 7 is Osteomancer Adept. You can find this creature from Bloomburrow in about 17,000 decks right now. It's a 1 and a black Squirrel Warlock with Death Touch. You can tap it, and until the end of the turn, you may cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging, in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter on it. The cost of foraging is exiling 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrificing a food, and a finality counter means that if your creature would die, it gets exiled instead. What I really like about this card is that the tap ability is not limited to a single creature card. If your graveyard is loaded and you have the mana for it, you can go crazy bringing out as many creatures as you can afford. At first you might consider this for explicit reanimation strategies, but I like it more as a value piece in strategies outside of that space. The Osteomancer has Death Touch, so where that matters, like in Aveline de Grand Pré, it's gonna go even harder. Shelob, Child of Ungoliant, is an awesome spider commander, and you might be hard pressed to get a non-spider in there, but if you want to, turning those foods into cards from your graveyard is pretty powerful. And lastly, if you're just filling your graveyard to fill your graveyard, like in Sidisi Brood Tyrant, having this option available to bring back what you want to bring back, as far as creatures go, is a solid plan. The 8th hidden gem is Vile Mutilator, found in about 13,000 decks right now. For 5 and 2 black, as well as the additional casting cost of sacrificing a creature or enchantment, you get a flying and trampling 6/5. Also, when it enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token enchantment, then sacrifices a non-token creature. If you have sacrifice fodder available in your deck, this is a massively undervalued threat. But even if you don't, the text says when the Vile Mutilator enters. It doesn't need to be cast to get all of that removal attached to it. And probably the biggest reason I like this creature as a big threat to cast or reanimate is that it specifies non-token enchantment and non-token creatures. I feel like we've all had games where there's been a Balin out there with 45 tokens that you can't cut through. Being able to avoid those tokens is a pretty big deal. Of course, this is going to be good in your Reanimator decks, but it's also a demon, so Kalia of the Vast or Raphael, Fiendish Savior, is going to like it. Probably my favorite spot for it though is in Satoru Umezawa. This is a commander that gives all of your creatures ninjutsu for 2, a blue, and a black, letting you cheat that into play at a reduced cost and still get that awesome game warping enter ability. And another place that I really like it is in Carmen Cruel Sky Marcher. This commander works by sacrificing permanents, so sacrificing that creature to cast the Vile Mutilator is actually a good thing. And then, if it gets dealt with or ends up in your graveyard another way, Carmen can reanimate it, bringing it back to the battlefield if her power is high enough. Hidden gem number 9 is Deadly Cover-Up. This card is in about 7.5 thousand decks and is a 3 and 2 black sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may collect Evidence 6. That means exiling cards from your graveyard with a total mana value of 6 or more. If you don't collect that evidence, this is simply a board wipe, destroying all creatures. But if you do collect that evidence, that's where this can go really hard. You first destroy all creatures, and then exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. You then search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. 2 major things to note here. This absolutely houses single card decks. If your opponent is playing an Heir Apparent deck or a Dragon's Approach deck, you can exile that from their graveyard and basically ruin their entire game. It's a little bit mean to do that, so make sure your playgroup is okay with that. The other thing to note is that this says target card from a graveyard. It doesn't specify non-land cards. If your opponent has a basic land in their graveyard, you can yoink that from their graveyard, their library, and their hand, essentially eviscerating their mana base. Again, it's a pretty mean thing to do, but the upside of this spell is pretty high, and the low side is just a nice board wipe. If your commander is indestructible, like Myojin of Grim Betrayal, this goes hard because the indestructible doesn't let it get destroyed by the effect. I also like this card in decks that are light on creatures. Black Waltz number 3 with that spell-slinging damage comes to mind. Get your creatures onto the battlefield with Ratadrabik of Urborg and then destroy them all and bring them all back for a huge one-sided W there. Hidden gem number 10 is Plasma Caster. This card is in 13,000 decks and it's a 1 and a red artifact equipment with an equip cost of 2. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever the equipped creature attacks, you get 2 energy counters. When you pay 2 energy, you can choose a target creature that's blocking the equipped creature and flip a coin. If you win the flip, you exile the chosen creature, Otherwise, Plasma Caster deals 1 damage to it. I've talked about this one somewhat recently, so I won't go too deep into it, but I love that all of the scary mechanics like energy and the coin flipping are self-contained. It adds a lot of spice to the game because of that repeated removal ability, making blocking for your opponents a little bit of a trickier decision than it otherwise might have been. Equipment goes hand in hand with your Voltron commanders, and Alexios, Deimos of Cosmos, is a great fit for this one, where you're attacking your opponents are attacking your opponents, and maybe killing their creatures as well, if this is equipped. Okun and Zindersplit do the coin flipping thing, so if you're into that, this is a good addition for that deck. And finally, I like this in Samut, Vizier of Noctimon. You want this and other creatures to be dealing combat damage the turn it comes down, and Plasma Caster attached to one of them makes that blocking decision harder, giving you a higher chance of drawing that card. Hidden gem number 11 is Connecting the Dots. This is a 1 and a red enchantment that's in about 8,000 decks right now. Whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. For 1 and a red, you can discard your hand, sacrifice Connecting the Dots, putting all cards exiled with the enchantment into their owner's hands. This is a nice early play to get that card advantage rolling to eventually dump your hand and get a fresh set. It's also a nice 4 mana option later on if you have a bunch of creatures to attack, exile a bunch of cards, and then essentially draw those cards. Importantly, it says whenever a creature you control attacks, and not whenever 1 or more creatures you control attacks. If you're going wide, this draws you so many cards, so I have to say Krenko Mob Boss with all of those goblins that are going to be getting in there. But also if you're doing exile stuff or exiles matter kind of things, like with Lelia, the Blade Reforged, this can accrue even more value. And finally, if sacrificing is part of the game plan already, like with Jury, Master of the Review, this can sacrifice itself, triggering that commander, as well as refill your hand. Hidden gem number 12 is Evora, Insatiable Air. This 1 and a red 1/1 legendary creature is only in 600 decks right now. She has trample, and whenever she enters or deals combat damage to a player, you create a blood token. And then, whenever you discard a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Evora. Evora takes advantage of the classic red card advantage mechanic to grow big with that trample. The blood tokens she creates feeds her ability and lets you see more cards, which isn't nothing. Marauding Mako is a very similar card and is in like 25 times more decks, which is wild to me. She goes best in decks that are ripping through cards, like in wheel decks like Shabraz and Braylon. Anya Falconwrath has a plan to discard cards for that madness, and you might as well grow Evora's strength with her on the battlefield. And I especially like her in Alicia Who Laughs at Fate. She can help set up both sides of that raid mechanic, discarding the card you want to reanimate while being able to attack with her increased power. Hidden gem number 13 is Cash Grab. This is a 1 and a green instant spell that's in about 17,000 decks. You mill 4 cards, and you may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or return a squirrel card to your hand this way, create a food token. This is widely found in squirrel decks, but don't let that scare you away in other strategies where you want cards in the graveyard. Realistically, if you're playing Grapple with the Past, you want to be playing Cash Grab. The flexibility of getting any permanent back to your hand from those 4 cards is massive. If you need a land, go ahead and get it. Otherwise, anything else is on the table. Get that Soul Ring. Like I said, it's in those squirrel decks already, so certainly put it in there, but where milling matters, like in the Wise Mothman, this goes really hard. And then if you're looking to use your graveyard as your hand, like you might be doing in 6, you'll certainly want Cash Grab to fill that graveyard up. You could also do mono-green reanimation things with this in Vorinclex. Transform it to the other side and get all of those creatures back, but make sure your graveyard is full enough with Cash Grab. Hidden gem number 14 is Quakestrider Ceratops. This is a 3 and a green 12/8 creature dinosaur that's in roughly 15,000 decks right now. This is my beautiful vanilla baby. The body is absolutely massive, and it turns into a serious problem with just a little bit of help. I have to talk about Jasmine Boreal of the 7, where the vanilla creature matters, but also in any deck where you're giving trample to your creatures, like in EDHrec and Goreclaw. This just goes crazy, or in any deck where you're finding yourself playing Garruk's Uprising or something of the like. It's especially fun in the niche fling decks, like in Zeatora the Incinerator. Get this out there and just throw it at somebody's face for a massive amount of damage. And of course, this is a massive beater, so play Orfeo the Boulder, give it double the power, and smash away. I love that for you. Hidden gem number 15 is Gold Rush. This is a 1 and a green instant spell that's in about 9,000 decks right now. This is the very rare pump spell that can straight up remove a player from the game. You create a treasure token, and until the end of the turn, up to one target creature gets +2/+2 for each treasure you control. At the floor, this is a +2/+2 pump spell, which isn't very good, though the single treasure refund of that 2 mana is welcome. But the high end is enormously high, again, able to simply take a player out of the game if they decide to not block, or you trample over whatever they put in front of your creature. The choice that Emissary Green gives your opponents is awesome in either scenario, and if they give you those treasures, you're pumping up your gold reserves like crazy. In Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, your opponents may think all of those treasure tokens you're collecting are simply there to be tapped for a green mana. Little do they know that the Gold Rush is coming to take them out. And to show Doctor Who a little bit more love, the third Doctor doubles down on those treasure tokens being on the battlefield. He gets the stat boost from them being on the battlefield, and then even more when you cast this instant pump spell. The prize hidden gem number 16 is Cactus Folk Sure Shot. This 2 a red and a green 4/4 is in roughly 17,000 decks right now. It has reach, it has ward 2, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, other creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain trample and haste until end of the turn. This is one of my favorite cards printed in 2024, and it is a huge value add in your stompy decks. The ward 2 is super annoying because this thing is a threat, but by the time other creatures come down, it might not even be the biggest threat anymore. I have this in my Moira Trash Tactician deck that I made a video about as the best bulk commander. The plan in that deck is to make a lot of mana with raccoons and play all of the bulk that I don't have in any of my other decks that I wanted to find a home for. And this giving all of those massive creatures trample and haste is a big deal. If your plan is to deal combat damage to players, but your commander doesn't have haste, Cactus Folk Sure Shot is a great addition. Wazatora Nakuro Queen is exactly that kind of commander, and having this on the battlefield gets you those cat tokens even faster. And also, look at those tokens. And finally, this will do work in Craven Proud Predator, where you're in the right colors and probably going to be playing a lot of big things to boost that creature's power. Also, Spider-Man is here, and we'll be talking about that on the channel soon enough. Thank you all for watching, and please take a moment now to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know what your favorite card from 2024 is.